Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give everyone a moment to connect to audio. Welcome, everyone. Hello, thank you for joining us for Practicum orientation. I'm giving everyone just a second to join via audio, but please feel free to type into the chat box how you are doing today. Feel free to share where you're joining us from, what organization you're with, if you're a US host. For the fellows, feel free to share which country you're joining us from, how you're doing. We'd love to see your messages in the chat box as we give everyone a moment to join the session. Thank you for being with us. My name is Les Miles, and I am the Community Solutions Program Manager at IREX. And we are welcoming all of our fellows, 118 fellows around the world, and our host collaborators all across the United States in this session today, and look forward to seeing your introductions in the chat. I won't read through them all, but feel free to follow along on the chat as I proceed with the session. We're so happy to be with you today. In this session, we are going to hear from Lynette Allison, who is CSP's Program Officer at the US Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And then the majority of our time together is going to be spent in small group discussions, which is my favorite way to spend time in a Zoom meeting. And we're going to have an opportunity for fellows and hosts to communicate about their cultures, their different work styles, and what considerations we should be taking into account for how to work together successfully in a practicum experience. But before we jump into the session, I wanted to point out or remind you of a few Zoom capabilities. First of all, please note that this meeting is being recorded because we do have a few folks in time zones where this meeting is at 4 a.m. in the morning. So we want to make sure that we have a recording for them if they weren't able to join. And we know that some people had other commitments. Also, there is live captioning available. If you click on the More menu at the bottom of the Zoom screen and then select Show Subtitle, that will launch the captions. These are auto-generated captions. We'll also be using the chat box feature. I see many of you have found that. Please continue to use it, but we do ask that you keep the discussion on topic. For now, we're still sharing introductions. And we welcome you to turn on your camera if you are able to. We love to engage and see our community if that's an option for you. If it's not, we understand, and it's okay to keep your camera off. Also, please turn your microphone off, keep yourself muted for now, but we will have a chance to talk in small groups in just a few minutes. And as always, before we begin our session today, I'd like to quickly review our guiding principles. I'm sure everyone is an expert by now, but I wanted to give a few ideas about how we could apply these guiding principles today in this session. So first of all, we are going to be sharing about cultural differences, and it's important that we practice care and consideration as we listen and respect each other's cultures and different perspectives. We are also going to practice integrity by following through on our commitments. If we say we're going to do something today, then let's do that in the days and weeks and months ahead. We will foster inclusion by inviting others into the conversation. If you notice someone in your group hasn't shared yet, please limit the time that you're talking and make space for them, or ask them to share their perspective. And recognize whose voice is not missing. In small groups, we know not every identity or culture is represented. And so it's important to recognize whose perspective may be missing and to keep that in mind as well. And finally, lifelong learning is perhaps the easiest principle to apply today, because we're going to be hearing so much about various cultures in countries around the world and here in the US. And so let's just approach today as an opportunity to value the experience of hearing others' perspectives and another way of doing things. I also would like to give an overview of our agenda for today, which is on the next slide. All right, so For today, we have thematic area sessions and a cafe hangout from 11 to 12 Eastern time. This is immediately following this session. These are optional but encouraged. Tomorrow, we will have one required session for fellows, and for our hosts who have joined us, we encourage you to join if you're able. Of course, that is optional. Our leadership coach, Deidre Combs, will be facilitating that session at 10 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will also have more thematic area sessions and cafe hangout. The cafe hangout is an opportunity to network informally and see who else is in the CSP network and what interests, skills, and expertise you have to share with each other. Wednesday is our last day of the practicum orientation. We will have more thematic area sessions and another cafe hangout in the morning in the East Coast. We will have our 10-year anniversary birthday celebration at 10 a.m. And this is a very special event. I encourage everyone to join us. CSP is excited to celebrate a decade of impact. This is our 10th cohort of fellows. Some of our hosts have been with us for many years, and we would love to have you there celebrating with us. That is at 10 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. And finally, we will have a culture share to end our practicum orientation. This is going to be a great opportunity to bring cultural artifacts in a show and tell type format. You'll be able to show something from your culture and talk about it, but we'll also we'll have some interesting discussion questions about our cultures and what makes each of our cultures unique. So I'm looking forward to that very much. All right, with all of that said, it's now my pleasure to introduce the mastermind who conceptualized CSP 10 years ago and who is responsible for stewarding CSP as an innovative and impactful program with a big heart. And that person is Lynette Allison from the U.S. Department of State. So please join me in welcoming Lynette.
Yes.
Thank you, Les. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. On behalf of the U.S. Department of State, congratulations on this new chapter in the life of the CSP community. I am delighted to be with you today at the start of the virtual CSP fellowships. So I have had the distinct privilege of working with IREX on the Community Solutions Program since we welcomed the very first cohort of CSP Fellows in 2011. As the 10th group of CSP leaders and partners, you are part of a powerful legacy of transformation built by dreamers and visionaries like yourself, working to realize the promise of an inclusive and a just world. So as Les said, this week CSP is having a birthday. We are celebrating a decade of exceptional leadership by CSP alumni and partners in weaving together new narratives about our shared future, addressing injustice, and choosing hope and dialogue as tools for progress. And we are also a few weeks away from another historic anniversary, which is an important reason why we are all here this morning or today. 60 years ago, in September 1961, the United States Congress created an exceptional piece of legislation that's called the Mutual Educational and Cultural Exchange Act of 1961. It has a very long title, but it has a powerful, bold purpose. And this law is sometimes called the FulbrightHayes Act because of the two men who sponsored the legislation. This is Congressman Hayes, who was a Democrat from Ohio, and Senator Fulbright, who was a Republican from Arkansas. Now, this legislation, which we call the FulbrightHayes Act, really changed the landscape of international relationships and public diplomacy here in the United States and around the world. And I want you to take a moment and think back to 1961. The world was rather unsettled. We had countries recovering from war, from colonial rule. We had walls, both physical and ideological, being built across the globe. And in short, it wasn't too different from today. The visionary behind the FulbrightHayes Act, Senator Fulbright, dreamed of a different way forward. Senator Fulbright had a vision for peace and stability that was not built on military might, but rather on the power of relationships, and more specifically, people-to-people exchange programs like Community Solutions to transform the world. Now, Senator Fulbright firmly believed that exchange programs could work to do something unique, that they could take nations, especially when we call out and let other people become the other, and that you take nations and turn those nations into people and turn hard ideologies into human aspirations. So how does this happen? The FulbrightHayes Act outlines 3 very distinct goals, and these act as the North Star, which guide all international exchanges at the Department of State. And the genius is in their simplicity. And I'm going to read them to you briefly because they are so important to the work that we are all doing. The first goal is to increase mutual understanding between the peoples of the United States and people around the world. To increase mutual understanding between the people of the United States and people around the world. I want you to think about that. Mutual understanding. All right, so how do we do that? By goal number 2. Goal number 2 says that in order to achieve mutual understanding, we need to strengthen the ties which unite the United States and other nations by demonstrating the best that we have to offer in educational and cultural interests, developments and achievements, and in return, to see the best developments and achievements around the world. And if we do this, if we work together, if we collaborate, then we're able to achieve goal number 3. And goal number 3 is the most important. It is to assist in the friendly and peaceful relations between the United States and other countries. This is peace legislation. It's peace through enhanced relations, through friendships, through direct people-to-people contact. It's peace through partnerships with friends and allies around the world. And 60 years later, this vision of change has endured, and the need for mutual understanding is still as critically important as ever. The FulbrightHayes Act is a public and shared commitment by the United States expressed in countless exchange programs like CSP to pursue peaceful relations through the hard work. This is not easy. Hard work of trying to see the world as others see it, and in return, to allow that others can see the world in ways that we have sometimes failed to see, or perhaps others may see it more accurately. This is legislation that is humble in its origin, despite being bold in its goals. Commitment to mutual understanding also serves as a powerful reminder that the only way to address complex and multidimensional challenges is by working together. This is a sentiment that US Secretary of State Blinken references often when he talks about the power of exchanges. Now, COVID-19's arrival on the world scene has revealed in real time how interconnected and dependent we are on one another on so many levels. In many ways, this prolonged period of global illness has been defined by loss. And how could it not? But welcomed or not, it has also brought us opportunities for introspection and growth. And this moment in time, asks us profoundly to answer the question of what we care about, who we are, and what we value. It is a time that has also bore witness to new innovations, tools for gathering and engaging, and opportunities to stitch together a new story of human potential that illuminates the world through our lives and our services. And if you have any doubt, look at where we are today, gathered online across 6 continents and states. It is in many ways a bit of a technology miracle. Now, this is also a time that calls for a renewed faith in our ability to work together to solve the world's most pressing environmental, social, and political challenges. Because at the end of the day, the great failure of our time won't be one of resources, but of imagination. Our inability to dream of a better tomorrow and work with a shared faith in the freedom of thought, the freedom of speech, press, and religion. CSP embraces the very kind of community leader to address these challenges and create sustained and lasting change. And at its core, which I have always said, CSP is about ordinary people becoming extraordinary when they step forward to care about those around them and their communities. These are individuals who lean into the complexities of the challenges that confront them, that trust in the power of relationships, that understand that solutions crafted without everyone at the table is no solution at all. So I want to end this morning with some thank yous. First and foremost, thank you to our CSP fellows. Thank you in advance for all the hard work of building stronger connections between the United States and your countries, for bringing the best of yourself and your countries to your host organizations and the communities in which they reside. Thank you for taking the time away from your families and your lives to take part in this program, especially with this online fellowship. I want to thank you for your willingness to share your perspectives and be cultural ambassadors. But also on a personal note, thank you for being thought leaders and working with IREX and the State Department to redefine the boundaries of relationships and engagement online. To our host and partners that have joined us today, thank you as well. Thank you for showing the world that America remains a welcoming place and that what unites us still is stronger than what divides us. Thank you for forging contacts with people around the world and helping to build global competencies. And clearly, the big thank you goes to our wonderful team at IREX. We know that this day could not have been achieved without your hard work, your continued dedication, and the care that you have shown for CSP. For the CSP team and Deidre, thank you for your remarkable stewardship of CSP. The State Department could not ask for a better partner, and I have watched in amazement as you have taken the CSP engine, taken it apart, and reconstructed it for a new virtual reality. I hope that I will have a chance to see all of you again. If you're having events during your virtual fellowship. I would love to pop in and say hello. But as I leave you today, I want to remind you that the goal of CSP, the goal for all of us, is not to try to save the world. That's too big of an ask, but rather to use our skills and talents and resources at our disposal to lay a brick and another so that those who follow after us will have an easier road to travel. So I thank you for letting me join you this morning for the remarkable privilege and honor of being part of CSP community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linnea. No one else I know has the skill of translating legislation into poetry the way that you do. Thank you for illuminating the FulbrightHayes Act and showcasing how we today, as part of this gathering, are contributing to mutual understanding, and how our efforts over the next months in the practicum phase of the orientation also contribute to those goals. In this session, we are going to focus on the practicum phase of the program and discuss collaborating across countries and cultures. But first, let's review a few details about the practicum phase. Fellows have just completed phase 1 of the fellowship. We just celebrated that in our first session that was fellows only. And in that phase, they participated in Community Leadership Institute coursework, or the CLI, if you hear those letters. And the CLI to date has covered ethical leadership, overcoming challenges, and strategic planning. And now, as we begin the practicum, fellows will continue to engage lightly in the Community Leadership Institute at the same time that they're completing their practicum work with the host organization. In September, fellows will continue with the Community Leadership Institute by completing a motivational leadership course. And then in October, hosts will be invited to join one of 5 new electives that we're offering for the fellows. So this is an opportunity for hosts to learn together with fellows. And we're very excited to be offering courses that are timely, and that I think will be really valuable to everyone involved. And some examples of those courses are responsible digital engagement, strategies for youth engagement, fundraising and partnership building. We also have a monitoring and evaluation course, and data for leaders, which explores how to analyze complex data and apply it when making very difficult decisions for an organization or community. Although the CLI continues over the next 2 months, the practicum is the real star of phase 2. And as a reminder, fellows are required to spend a minimum of 8 hours per week over the next 8 weeks, that's from September 7th to October 31st, collaborating with their host organization on a project of mutual interest, and that results in one key deliverable. Host collaborators should spend at least 1 hour, I think 1 to 2 hours is most likely approximation, per week, supporting the fellow and providing feedback, guidance, mentorship, networking, anything that you're able to offer to enhance the fellow's. Fellows and host collaborators may choose to devote more time to the practicum if their schedules allow, but we ask you to keep in mind that the CLI coursework is occurring at the same time as the practicum, and we encourage you to practice self-care by not overcommitting or overextending yourself during the next 2 months. And one of the things you will do together is, in the next few days, is complete the practicum work plan. This is due on September 12th, and it outlines what the fellows' goals are for the practicum and what their deliverable will be. Phase 2 will end with the mid-program workshop and the elective symposium, where we will all come together again online to share our learnings from phase 2. That will take place from November 1st through 3rd. And now we get to move on to the really fun part of our time together. Let's dive into a discussion. So over to my colleague, Jessica Lane, who is one of our co-facilitators of the Community Leadership Institute, and she will guide us through reviewing some common cultural differences.
Great, thank you so much, Les, and thank you, Linnea, for your remarks. I'm usually tearing up every time you speak. They're wonderful to hear from you. And it's so amazing. We have over 150 people on this call. So again, thank you for the host collaborators for joining with all the fellows all over the world. I saw some familiar names and faces who have been in person in the past. I know Rich Felice is here, Jim Parsons, Jeffrey Weisberg, Kat Zigma. I'm like looking through the names. I'm sure I've missed a lot of you, but those are some of our long time hosts who are just really grateful that you're here with us today for our 10th cohort. So to make sure we have enough time for small breakout groups, I am just going to very briefly go through some of the cultural considerations, and there are many, but some of the cultural considerations when working throughout the practicum, so working across cultures. And the ones that I'll go over right now are what we see come up the most between host organizations and fellows. On the VFairs platform, we do have some lovely pre-recorded videos where you'll get to hear my voice or see my face again to go through more of these cultural considerations and go through some scenarios. So for now, I'll just go through 4 of these, and then we'll break out into these small group discussions where you can really talk through these a bit more. So one of the things that we see come up is a cultural consideration of time orientation. So in certain cultures, time is very specific. Sometimes people say in American culture, right? Like we started this session exactly on time. Whereas in other cultures, time is more flexible. So this is something that can sometimes cause a little bit of conflict with the practicum if there's different expectations of time. So that's something that, when you start working together next week, is to really talk through what are each of your expectations and your relation towards time. Do you expect things to start immediately on time or a deadline to be very specific, or is time not as rigid as that for you? Next cultural consideration is task or relationship oriented. So I'm curious if you have the ability to raise your hand, how many of you, when you usually go into the office, maybe spend a lot of time talking to each other first, getting to know your colleagues, catching up over a cup of coffee? You don't really get to your desk right away. You kind of just chat with each other for a while first. Is anyone like that? I see some hands. Yeah. I noticed that some of the hands, there are some of the hosts in this. Yeah, so it's a mix. For some people, this is normal, right? The relationship might be something that comes first. But for some of us whose hands might not be raised, we might tend to get to the task immediately at hand and not want to waste any time talking to people. So this is something that comes up with different cultures, is if we're task or more relationship oriented. The next one that I'll review is the communication style. We can pull that one up on the screen. And with this, it's either direct or indirect communication. And I will say that all of the ones I'm reviewing right now, it's a scale, right? You're not either 100% relationship oriented and not task oriented at all. It's just which way do you prefer overall, or which way is the norm for you? Also, your personal norm might be different than the cultural norm that you operate within. So consider that as well. Like, which norm do you consider for yourself? So with communication style as direct or indirect, this can often come up where potentially the fellows might come from a more indirect communication style and might not want to ask certain questions, or might feel more nervous to ask questions. And the host collaborator might want the fellow to ask more questions or share their ideas more. So this is how kind of communication styles might come up. Also with the way that people give feedback, this one can come up a lot. And then the last one is around uncertainty and adaptability. This can sometimes be a little bit harder for us to define as far as where we fall within. But the way I'll ask you to think about this is, if something needs to change in your work, do you find that really disruptive? Or do you just jump to it and say, okay, that's fine, change is totally normal, I'll just do that right away? So thinking about how flexible you are with adapting, changing, all of those things. Again, this is a very brief overview of certain cultural considerations, and there's videos on this that are pre-recorded, so I won't go into any more detail here. But these are the things, again, that sometimes can come up in different ways. If you notice some discomfort when you're talking to each other, or you notice some awkwardness, but you're not sure why, it could be because you have these different cultural considerations and just need to communicate with each other to understand each other more. So with that being said, we're going to do small breakout groups so that you all can talk to each other and talk through some of these things. So how we'll do this is we'll do 3 different rounds of groups. You'll go into a group with different fellows and host collaborators, and you will have, and I'm very sorry that this is short, but you'll have 6 minutes. We'll probably have groups of 4 people for 6 minutes, where you'll just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to share these answers to the questions. So this first round, and you'll see this pop up on your screen in a minute, is what are the work culture and professional norms that you operate within? And again, it'll be a brief answer to this, but you'll want to share what are the work culture and professional norms you operate in. So in a moment, Katie will pull up the breakout groups. Then you'll click join to go into those. You'll have 6 minutes to chat with each other, and then you'll come back into this main group and I'll prompt you for round 2. How's that sound? Good, okay, so you'll join your group and we'll meet back in 6 minutes. Okay, welcome back everyone. I see a lot of you are already back. Hopefully, well, we'll have a little bit of time to debrief at the end, but I wanna jump us right into the next round. So this next round, if we go to this slide before, and this may have come up in the last chat you had, but we'll chat a little more about it. Have you worked with people from very different cultures or norms than you, and did you experience any challenges? So we'll jump right into the next breakout group.
Jess, are we going into the same groups or new groups this time?
New groups. Try and get people to meet as many people as they can.
Right, here we go.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I know we definitely didn't have enough time in our group to talk. So hopefully you'll use the VFairs platform to continue chatting with each other. But let's go right into our third breakout group. And this one is, how can you navigate differences to productively work together? You may have already started chatting about this, but give some of your tips or advice to each other in this next breakout group. Okay, hi everyone. I think everyone's coming back in. Welcome, welcome. I know that that was way too short. And if there's one piece of feedback, we know that. And we'll try and figure things out and how to make it longer. But yeah, welcome back to the main session. I'd love to hear any takeaways from you all. I think we have enough time for a few people to share on their microphone, but definitely type in the chat box if you're able to. Oh, and Clayton's with us. Welcome, Clayton, a longtime host. So let's have Dimji share, and then Clayton share, and then Tafiq, if I can ask you to keep your remarks to about a minute, just so we have enough time, a minute or less. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I want to share something from today's sessions that I want to take away for, let's say, for the second phase of this fellowship. Firstly, it was a really good session today that we had opportunity to meet ourselves even better with other fellows. Also, we had a chance to meet with some of the host organizations that are going to place different fellows in their organizations, and it was a nice opportunity to get in touch with them, especially, and hopefully in the next period we are going to have a more productive and more how to say, better fulfilling the goals of this fellowship. So I'm wishing luck to everybody and to myself firstly. So hopefully this period we are going to be more and more better. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And over to you, Clayton.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for us, conflict is something that is kind of unavoidable when you have really passionate people. And everyone brings, as I like to say, a defensive ownership to the table. And that's not a bad thing, because you have people that are involved with projects and programs and they're really passionate about them. That goes internally and with fellows. So the best thing to do is, of course, listen and understand where the person is coming from. Even chart these kinds of things out. But it's important to also, as the listener, come with a basis of scientific reality and understanding and all of those kinds of good faith types of things, but to also recognize if someone is being kind of irrational in their beliefs, and that there's other ways that they could think about the problem or the source of the conflict that can show them kind of another path forward. So it's kind of a two-way street, the listener and the person speaking, but as long as dialogue continues and both parties are willing to find a path forward, usually those types of things are solvable and actually make for a more cohesive team in the long run.
Yeah, thank you, Clayton. That's a great point, that conflicts are inevitable, right? And it's just an opportunity for us to listen to each other, to learn. So having these conversations doesn't mean that now a conflict will never occur, right? It means that it
Absolutely.
may likely occur, and let's try and talk through it with each other. So,
yeah, we also use it as a chance to teach conflict resolution. Right. So in the past, in working with a fellow or even an internal staff member around these things, they then learn those skills. So when they go on to become managers, especially in their back home projects, they can lessen conflict in their own organizations too. So that's a great thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And Tawfiq, if you can just keep your comments to like 30 seconds.
Sure thing, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for giving the floor, and I fully agree with Clayton, if I'm pronouncing his name right. Yes, conflict delayed is a conflict multiplied, so we should face it in different ways. I would just mention a few takeaways. Number one, we should definitely make a dichotomy between a friend and a coworker, and that will make our life way more easier. So lower our expectations in order to see things professionally and objectively, right? In human rights field, that's a little bit difficult because we are emotionally attached, as Clinton and Dimche has mentioned. But nonetheless, there is always a way, there is a will. And number two, we should not see them as culturally different, but rather as different people, different personalities, different characters, different who've been facing different socialization, right? So, and if we have that in mind, to make sure that there is always a ground that we can agree on. Rumi famously said, between the field of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. Please meet me there. So I practice that on a daily basis, or try to.
Thank you, Tawfiq. That's one of my favorite quotes from Rumi, actually. It's a beautiful one. So yes, trying to meet each other, not in a right or wrong place, but somewhere in the middle, right? Thank you for that reflection. And there's a lot coming in the chat box as well, a lot about listening, respecting each other. And I really appreciate your point, Tawfiq, that we're meeting each other as people, right? So even if we operate in this culture, we still bring our own personhood to every interaction and our own norms and everything like that. So yes, and just being an active listener, like Archana said in the chat box. So yeah, thank you all for sharing your reflections and some key takeaways, although you all spoke beautifully about all of yours and typed in the chat box really well. But here's just a few of the practical tips that we recommend is just to communicate openly and often. So, at the beginning, share what are those norms that you discussed in your group or you reflected on. Spend the first, check in with your host collaborator or with fellow, just speaking openly about these things so that you understand where each other's coming from. And then continue to check in with each other. And it's okay to even ask, how is this collaboration going for you? So it's not always just about, okay, did you reach that deadline, but are we working well together? What are the ways maybe I could meet you more halfway? Things like that. And all these things will help to build trust. That's really the goal is showing up to these meetings, checking in on each other and building that sense of trust with one another. And just like we just said there's no right or wrong, right? But we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. And we should all be prepared to make some adjustments in order to work well together. So these are just a few of our tips and takeaways, and we're just really grateful that you all shared with each other during this session. And we'll have many other opportunities to share. And thank you, Rich Felice, one of our host collaborators, for suggesting we do this again in another month, which I think is a great idea. So we'll figure out and arrange something like that. Okay, so we've got just a minute or two left. So I am going to hand it over to Les Miles again to close us out.
Thank you, Jess. And it's always an encouraging sign when there's a lot of excitement to share more. I'm looking forward to all of you starting your practicum and having these conversations one-on-one between fellow and host collaborator. I'm going to walk us through what's happening for the rest of our practicum orientation. In the next hour, meaning starting immediately after this session, there are 3 optional sessions. These are open to fellows and host collaborators on the VFairs platform. We have the virtual cafe hangout, which is a space for informal conversations and networking. Feel free to bring coffee, tea, or whatever beverage you prefer. We will also have the environmental issues thematic area session, which will focus on stakeholder engagement for climate impact. And we will have a peace and conflict resolution thematic area workshop on diversity and skills building in the post-pandemic job market. Tomorrow, please review the agenda for additional thematic area workshops and our large group session, which is required for fellows, led by Dr. Combs from 10 to 11 a.m. And during that session, we will be reviewing the Elemental Styles Leadership Assessment. If you haven't completed your assessment, please do that so that you get the most out of that session. And please be sure to check out the photo booth, the video booth on VFairs. These are opportunities to take fun pictures, share on social media, record a short video about your CSP experience. We'd really love to hear from you. So please do explore the VFairs platform anytime this week when you have a moment. I'm especially looking forward to celebrating CSP's 10th birthday with you on Wednesday. Hope to see all of you there, including our host collaborators. We have 2 really fun days ahead of us, and I want to appreciate and thank all of you for being with us this hour. To our host collaborators, thank you for opening your doors virtually to fellows this year and welcoming them into your organizations. To our fellows, thank you for all of the time and commitment you have put into the fellowship so far and that you're going to carry forward into the practicum. We feel this family all around us and the supportive network, and we're grateful for each and every one of you. So with that, I'll turn it over to all of you to move on to the next sessions or the rest of your day. Thank you and take care, everyone.